What a difference a year makes. Just 364 days ago, I stood on this very stage and we started a conversation about food. And I'm so grateful we did, because over the past year, much has happened in Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem, and virtually everywhere else across the Piedmont Triad. And our conversations about food are needed more now than ever. Last year, I introduced you to the Food Research and Action Center's Food Hardship Study. We talked about how in 2012, Greensboro High Point had the 4th highest rates of food hardship in the United States. By 2013, we were tied for 2nd with New Orleans. Well, just last month, the 2015 rankings came out. And as you might have heard, Greensboro High Point now has the highest rates of food hardship in the entire US. Not exactly the kind of list we want to be at the top of. People keep asking me if I was surprised by these 2015 rankings, and I really wish I could say I was. To be honest, I was hopeful that we had moved down the list, because I know just how hard everyday people, city and county agencies, local churches, and a variety of individuals and groups are working to promote food security across the Piedmont Triad. At the same time, I also know just how much work is still ahead of us. What did surprise me, however, was that Greensboro High Point is the only major metropolitan region with a food hardship rate over 25%. This should give you a little reason to be worried. But I can also tell you that there's reason to be hopeful, because people across the Triad are making progress and working together to take on the challenges of our local food system. Last year, I also introduced you to the idea of a mobile farmers market as an innovative first step to get food to people who need it. At the end of my talk, someone from the audience asked me when we could expect to see a mobile market in Greensboro. While I wasn't quite ready to share the good news last May, I can tell you that on October 1st, 2014, a partnership under the leadership of the Guilford County Department of Health and Human Services launched the Mobile Oasis Mobile Farmers Market in Greensboro. So let's revisit mobile markets, and food deserts, and ethnosh, and food councils. Let's take a step back and see what it takes to build a more vibrant food system. And let's consider some updates in this little redux, because that's what happens when you spark a conversation. We have to keep it going. At the core of last year's conversation was the idea that food is a systems issue. Sure, it sounds simple, but it's not easy to make sure that people have access to affordable food. But when you realize that food is a systems issue, you start to realize all of the little individual pieces that have to work together. If only we had a TED Talk that could fill us in on all of the details about food systems. Oh, wait, we do. Okay, here we go.
Here's one way of thinking about it. Let's start up at the top with producers. First, you have to grow the food. You have to make the ingredients. A lot of times, but not always, this happens on a farm. Sometimes you have to transport the food. You have to take it from the farm to various other points in the food system. On occasion, you transform the food. You turn the tomatoes into salsa, the cucumbers into pickles, the flour, butter, and sugar into delicious baked goods. Then, you often package the food and sell it at a retail location. Well, then you get to eat, which for most of us is the best part. Finally, you deal with the leftovers through practices like composting. On top of this process are several external factors, including financial, like the rising cost of food, context and environment, like the ongoing drought in California, political, like our federal farm bill or food assistance programs, and social cultural, like family food traditions.
But what does all of this mean? And what does any of it have to do with food hardship? Well, if we look back at the Food Research and Action Center's food hardship study, we find out that they only asked a single question. Have there ever been times in the last 12 months when you did not have enough money to buy food that you or your family needed? That doesn't tell us very much, but it does give us a starting point. It does tell us that at least 1 in 4 people who live in Greensboro and High Point don't have enough money to buy the food that they need, or the food that they need is too expensive. But when we start to think about food as a systems issue, we can look back at all of the steps in the system that increase the costs between the people who grow the food and the people who eat it. We start to recognize some of the financial factors, like the rising cost of food, in combination with contextual features, like our loss of jobs in furniture, textile, and manufacturing industries, and how those different external factors have made it increasingly difficult for some people and some consumers to participate in our local food system. At the same time, we can also start to identify innovative solutions within the system. We start to take seriously farm-to-table efforts that are attempting to reduce both the cost and the distance between producers and consumers. We start to identify the potential to grow jobs around food at each and every step in the system. At the same time, with all of the complexities of our food system, I often find myself asking, where do we start? So, 2014, Marianne, where should we put our focus?
At the intersection of poverty and access. And the USDA agrees with me, most of the time, because they made these concepts their focus when they started mapping food deserts. To qualify as a food desert, the USDA says that the census tract where you live has to meet two terms. Basically, your neighborhood has to be both low income and low access, meaning that a certain number of people live below the poverty line, and at least a third of you live more than a mile from a grocery store. The USDA has been mapping food deserts for the past 3 years using an interactive website that they now call the Food Access Research Atlas. So let's take a look at where the food deserts are here in Guilford County. In Guilford, we have 24 food deserts. They were first mapped by my friend Mark Smith, an epidemiologist for the County Department of Public Health. He also noted that the Guilford County food deserts are clustered in areas with the highest rates of poverty, the highest concentrations of racial and ethnic minorities, and the highest rates of chronic health problems. When you look at the national data, we learn that 23.5 million Americans now live in food deserts. That's almost the population of Texas. And many of them live in low-income areas without reliable transportation. Which kind of makes that whole traveling more than a mile to get to a grocery store a bit more of a challenge.
Sure. Greensboro and High Point have the highest rates of food hardship in the US. And Guilford County has 24 food deserts. But when you start looking at what's actually going on inside these food deserts, we realize very quickly that the entire Piedmont Triad is in the middle of a defining moment when it comes to the future of our food system. So let's get to the updates. Last year, I talked about building vibrant food systems by making food mobile, building an oasis, and sharing food. When it comes to making food mobile and building an oasis, I've already mentioned the Mobile Oasis Mobile Farmers Market. The idea behind a mobile farmers market is really pretty simple. Rather than expecting people to get to healthy food, a mobile market takes the food directly to the people who need it. This project is based off of a larger partnership between the Guilford County Department of Health and Human Services, the City of Greensboro Parks and Recreation, Vision Tree Community Development Corporation, East Market Street Development, Prince of Peace Lutheran Church, the members of the Warnersville neighborhood, and the UNCG Department of Communication Studies. We were able to organize a modestly successful pilot test in the fall of 2014, and we're set to start our 2015 season just in a couple of weeks on May 20th. Programs like this are definitely innovative because of the way that they increase access to food. At the same time, this partnership is also involved with the City Oasis Project at Warnersville. There we go. With the City Oasis Project at Warnersville, which is an urban farm project that I also mentioned last year. Last April, the U.S. Department of Agriculture announced that they were sending almost $100,000 our way to keep both the mobile market and the urban farm in operation until the end of our 2015 season. But these projects are still being pilot tested. And building a vibrant food system requires that we remain committed to increasing access to affordable food. Sometimes that means finding creative ways to share food. And Ethnosh has done just that. Every month, Ethnosh hosts a meetup at a local immigrant or refugee-owned restaurant. Guests get a $5 plate of food and a healthy dose of community. Ethnosh has hosted more than 16 meetups across the Triad, and over 2,000 hungry customers have generated more than $15,000 in business for these local restaurants. And Ethnosh and the Mobile Oasis Project aren't the only initiatives that are raising awareness and building our momentum around increasing access. The Greater High Point Food Alliance recently hosted High Point's first ever food summit as a way to raise awareness around the growing food concerns for their community. The city of Greensboro has a small planning grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to develop a plan that will grow businesses around local foods. And the Renaissance Community Co-op, which is a community-driven effort to build a grocery store in a Guilford County food desert, has plans to open their doors by the end of 2015. At the very least, that takes our food desert count from 24 down to 23 by the end of the year. It's great to celebrate these efforts, particularly because of the ways in which they increase access to affordable food. But increasing access is only the first step when it comes to building a vibrant food system. Building a vibrant food system means that we need to keep this conversation going far beyond our time here today. It means that we need to talk about cooking skills, which are rapidly becoming a lost art in American culture. It means that we actually need to listen to the voices and stories of people who are experiencing hunger and food hardship. They're an incredible piece of the puzzle that are missing from a lot of our conversations. We need to build up our local food networks. Which brings me to my final update. Last year, I also mentioned food councils as a way to promote communication between all of the different moving pieces in our food system. Today, we now have 4 active food councils in the Triad, including the Guilford Food Council, the Forsyth County Food Consortium, the Greater High Point Food Alliance, and the Davidson County Local Food Network. When you're looking for the places to continue the conversation, these are the places to start. Although much has changed in Greensboro and Guilford County over the last year, much has also stayed the same. When it comes down to it, we all still have to eat. That hasn't changed in the last year, nor is it likely to change anytime soon. At the same time, we can look toward building a more vibrant future because people remain pretty resourceful when it comes to making their food choices. So, my hope for the future remains the same, that we can work as neighbors to build a more vibrant food system, from the people who grow the food to the people who sell it in the grocery store, where everyone has easy access to healthy and affordable food, regardless of where they live or what their income level might be. We right now are in the midst of taking one of our greatest challenges and doing something truly innovative. We're sharing food, growing jobs, and building community, and truly making the most of what our food system has to offer. Thank you.